If you've ever felt invisible, ever had someone look right through you and see only what they wanted to see, then you need to hear my story. It's not about getting old. It's about being written off. It's about how the people who are supposed to love you the most can sometimes become the biggest threat to your freedom. And it's about what happens when they finally push you too far. Stick with me because I'm going to tell you how I let my own children build a cage for me, and then how I used their own blueprint to lock them out of my life for good. Share this with anyone who needs to be reminded that the quietest person in the room is often the one holding all the cards. My name is Vincent, and I am 71 years old. According to my children, Mark and Chloe, that's the most important fact about me. It's the beginning and the end of my story. 71. A number that in their eyes has erased every other number that came before it. The 2 decades I spent at the felt tables of Las Vegas, reading men who would sell their own mothers for a better hand. The 5 years I spent nursing my wife Eleanor through an illness that stole her from me. Piece by piece, the 40-odd years I spent being their father, a role I once thought was the most significant I'd ever play. All of it gone, replaced by a single damning number that means frail, confused, and most conveniently, malleable. The shift was so subtle at first, I almost missed it. It started after what they call my health scare. The truth is, I'd spent a long afternoon in the garden under a hot sun and forgotten to drink enough water. I got dizzy standing up too fast. I stumbled, caught myself on the doorframe, and sat down for a minute, until the world stopped spinning. An hour later, I was fine. But my daughter Chloe had been on her way over and saw the whole thing through the screen door. The look on her face wasn't just concern, it was something else. It was opportunity. That single dizzy spell became the inciting incident in the trial of my own competence. Suddenly, my son Mark was calling twice a day, his voice thick with a syrupy, patronizing tone he usually reserved for toddlers and very stupid dogs. Chloe started dropping by with Tupperware containers filled with bland, mushy food, patting my hand and telling me not to worry my pretty little head about a thing. My pretty little head. I'm a man who once bluffed a Texan oil baron out of $100,000 with nothing but a pair of sevens and a bead of sweat. I faked on my upper lip. And now I have a pretty little head. They think the silence is a symptom. They see me sitting in my armchair, the one Eleanor and I bought 50 years ago, and they assume the quiet is a void. They see me staring out the window and assume I'm lost in a fog of senility. They don't understand that I've spent the better part of my life in rooms filled with noise, the clatter of chips, the nervous chatter, the forced laughter, and I learned that the most valuable information is never in the sound. It's in the silence between the words. It's in the tells. And my children, bless their hearts, have more tells than a crooked dealer. Mark, my son, the financial advisor who advises everyone but himself, has a habit of rubbing the back of his neck when he's about to propose something that primarily benefits him. Chloe, my little girl who never quite grew up, starts speaking in a higher pitch, a little girl voice, when she's trying to manipulate me emotionally. They think they're being clever. They think I'm a doddering old fool, so I let them. It's a strategy, you see. In poker, you never correct your opponent when they're making a mistake. If they've pegged you as a loose, aggressive player, you don't suddenly tighten up and show them their error. You lean into it. You let them build their entire strategy around a false assumption. You let them overcommit, pushing more and more of their chips into the pot, confident in their read. You let them feel like the smartest person at the table, right up until the moment you turn over your cards and take every last dime they have. My children think they're playing a simple game of old maid with their dear old dad. They have no idea they've sat down at a high-stakes table, and I'm letting them deal. The other night was a master class in their delusion. They thought I was asleep in my chair, my head lolled to one side, a gentle snore rumbling in my chest. It's an act I've perfected. A little bit of mouth breathing, a slight rhythmic twitch of my finger. It's utterly convincing. From the kitchen their voices came in hushed, urgent whispers, the kind people use when they think they're being discreet, but are actually just broadcasting their intentions to anyone bothering to listen. He almost fell again, Mark, Chloe said, her voice a thin, reedy thing. The doctor said, "We need to be proactive. Power of attorney is the next logical step, for his own protection." There was the sound of a cupboard opening, the clink of glasses. Mark's voice was lower, more conspiratorial. "The house is the big one, Chloe. We can't have him living here alone. It's a liability. We sell it, put the money into a managed account and find him a nice place. Something manageable. A nice place. I know what that means. It's a box with a window, a place where they serve Jell-O in 3 different colors and call it a balanced meal. It's a place where I would be a resident, a patient, a number, not Vincent, not a father, not a man, just an expense to be managed. And the house. This house. The place where I brought Eleanor home as a bride. The place where I taught Mark to ride a bike on the worn flagstones of the patio. The place where Chloe's height is still marked in faint pencil on the pantry door frame. They talk about it like it's a stock certificate, an asset to be liquidated. They don't see the ghosts in every room, the memories soaked into the very walls. Or maybe they do, and they just don't care. I didn't move a muscle. I just lay there, breathing deeply, playing the part of the oblivious old man sleeping in his chair. They were revealing their entire hand, laying all their cards on the table for me to see. They had a plan. A neat, tidy plan to package up my life, sell off the parts and store what was left in a place of their choosing. They thought they held a royal flush. They had no idea I was holding 4 aces. And the 5th ace. It was the simple fact that they had absolutely no idea who their father really was. They saw a retired insurance salesman, a quiet widower they had forgotten, or perhaps never really known, about Vegas. They'd forgotten about the smoke-filled rooms, the cold calculations and the hard-earned truth that has governed my life. You never show your strength until the pot is too big for your opponent to walk away from. And my children, they just kept pushing all their chips to the center of the table. After they left that night, tiptoeing out of the house like a pair of thieves, I sat up. The feigned sleep fell away, and a cold, hard clarity took its place. It settled deep in my bones, a feeling I recognized from a lifetime ago. It was the feeling you get when the cards have been dealt, the bets have been made, and all that's left is the turn of the river card. It wasn't about anger, not yet. It was about calculation. It was about seeing the path to victory and preparing to walk it. I went to the window and watched their car pull away, its red taillights disappearing into the dark. They thought they were driving toward a solution. They had no idea they were driving straight into a trap. I hadn't even set yet. They were setting it for themselves. And I, their dear, sweet, confused old father, was going to let them walk right into it. The first rule of a good bluff is to let your opponent bluff himself. The days that followed were a slow, agonizing descent into a role I was beginning to inhabit a little too well. The pain of it was a physical thing, a dull ache behind my ribs that had nothing to do with my heart and everything to do with my soul. To see your own flesh and blood look at you with such pity, to have them speak to you in a voice that strips away decades of your life, your experiences, your very identity, it's a unique kind of cruelty. It's a death by 1,000 condescending pats on the hand. Mark would call in the mornings, "Hey Dad, just checking in. Did you remember to take your pills today? The blue one in the morning, the white one at night. Don't get them mixed up now." I'd play my part. I'd inject a note of tired confusion into my voice. "Oh, hello, son. The pills? Yes, I think so. The blue one. Is that for my pressure or my, you know?" I could hear the sigh on the other end of the line, the sound of a man burdened by the immense weight of a failing parent. "It's for your blood pressure, Dad. We went over this. Chloe put them in the little box for you. Remember? The one with the days of the week on it." "Oh yes, the box. Very clever." He wasn't being a son. He was being a caregiver, but not a real one. Real caregivers, like I was for Eleanor, are forged in the fires of love and desperation. They learn patience because they have no other choice. Mark's patience was a thin veneer over a core of impatience. He was following a script, checking off a box on his to-do list. Manage Dad. It was transactional, and every transaction chipped another piece away from me. Chloe's method was different, more insidious. She weaponized affection. She'd come over and start tidying up, which was really a reconnaissance mission. She'd go through my mail ostensibly to help me keep track of bills, but I knew she was looking for financial statements, for any sign that I was mismanaging my affairs. She'd rearrange the food in my pantry, clucking her tongue. Dad, this can of beans expired 2 months ago. You can't eat this. You could get sick. We don't want another scare, do we? She'd throw it out with a dramatic flourish, a testament to her vigilance. She never considered that I kept a few old cans at the back for a local food drive, and the ones I actually ate were perfectly fresh. To her, the expired can wasn't a mistake. It was evidence. It was another brick in the wall of my incompetence that she was so diligently building. The worst part was the hand patting. It was her signature move. Every time she made a decision for me, every time she corrected a perceived error, she would reach out and pat my hand, a gesture that said, there, you poor, confused creature. I'll take care of everything." It was a gesture of dominance disguised as comfort, and it made my skin crawl. It felt like she was checking to see if I was still warm. I needed to understand where this was coming from. It wasn't just the health scare. That was the excuse, the catalyst. The motivation had to be deeper. And so, in the quiet of the afternoons, while they thought I was napping, I'd let my mind drift back. I'd play the hands of the past, looking for the tells I'd missed. I remembered Mark, age 16. He'd crashed his first car, a modest sedan I'd bought him. He'd been street racing with friends. When I confronted him, his face wasn't one of remorse, but of indignant justification. "It's just a car, Dad. It's not like you can't afford another one." He didn't see the dented fender. He saw a logistical problem for me to solve. He'd always seen me as a bank, a resource. My love was measured in the checks I wrote for his tuition, his down payment on his first apartment, the seed money for his business that never quite took off. I was the house, and he was the player with an endless line of credit. And Chloe, I remembered her wedding, a lavish affair far beyond what her fiancé, David, could afford. I'd picked up the tab for the venue, the cater, the $1,000 cake. Eleanor was gone by then, and I think in my grief, I was trying to buy her happiness. During the father-daughter dance, she'd whispered in my ear, "Not 'I love you, Dad,' but did you see the look on David's mother's face? She's so jealous. This is the best day of my life." It was never about the moment. It was about the appearance of the moment. Her life was a performance, and I was the silent producer, funding the show from behind the curtain. It wasn't that they were evil. They were entitled. They had grown up in the long, comfortable shadow of my success, a success they never fully understood. I told them I was in risk management. It was the truth, in a way. I never told them my office was a poker room, and my clients were sharks, whales, and tourists with more money than sense. I wanted to protect them from that world, to give them a clean, respectable life. But in doing so, I had hidden my greatest strength from them. They had never seen me fight, never seen me calculate, never seen me dismantle an opponent with nothing but psychology and a well-timed bet. They saw the winnings, but not the work. They enjoyed the fruits of my labor without ever respecting the man who had labored. And now, they saw the old man, not the warrior. They had mistaken the peaceful retirement I had earned for a surrender. This realization wasn't a sudden lightning bolt. It was a slow, creeping dawn, and with it came a cold resolve. My promise to Eleanor was to look after them. Yes, but looking after them didn't mean letting them consume me. It didn't mean being a willing participant in my own erasure. She would have never wanted that. She would have been the first to tell me to play my hand. She loved the poker player in me, the survivor. She would have hated this pathetic nodding doll I was pretending to be. The catalyst, the moment the game truly changed for me, came on a Tuesday. Chloe had brought over a stack of brochures. They were glossy, filled with pictures of smiling, silver-haired people playing bingo and doing water aerobics. The pines, sunny meadows, golden horizons. The names were so cheerfully deceptive. They were prisons of beige walls and antiseptic smells. She sat opposite me, her face a mask of loving concern. "Dad, we need to talk about the future," she began, her voice in that high, gentle register. "This big old house is a lot for you to manage. We worry. Mark and I found some lovely communities. They have nurses on staff and prepared meals. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing." I just looked at the brochures. A picture of a man, probably my age, was staring vacantly at a checkerboard. He looked neutered, tamed. I feigned confusion. "But this is my home, sweetheart. Your mother and I know, Dad. I know," she said, reaching for my hand. The pat. I flinched internally but let her do it. "But we have to be realistic. After your scare, we need to make sure you're safe. Mark and I can handle everything. The sale of the house, moving your things. We'll find a place for your chair. Find a place for my chair." As if it were a stray dog, she left the brochures on the coffee table and kissed my forehead. "Just think about it, Dad. It's for the best." That evening, I did my usual performance. I ate the mushy casserole she'd left, made a show of being tired, and settled into my chair for my nap. They'd be back later, Mark and Chloe together, for what they were calling a family meeting. I knew what it was. It was the final push. They were coming with paperwork. I closed my eyes and regulated my breathing. And I waited. It didn't take long. They came in using Chloe's key, their whispers starting before the door even clicked shut. They moved into the dining room, just out of my direct line of sight. "Did you give him the brochures?" Mark asked. "Yes." He seemed confused. "But he'll come around." "He always does," Chloe replied. "Good. I've got the preliminary power of attorney documents here from my lawyer. He said it's better to get it signed while he's still compliant. Once it's done, we can list the house and get him moved into the Pines before winter." There it was, the Pines, the cheapest one in the stack of brochures, the one with the C- rating from the State Health Board. But then came the part that turned the blood in my veins to ice. "What about the accounts?" Chloe asked, her voice dropping lower. "Is there enough to cover the entry fee at the Pines and, for us, after the house sells?" Mark let out a long, weary sigh. The sigh of the burdened son. "His main checking and savings are decent. Enough to get things started. I've been looking at the statements. He's got his pension, Social Security. It's a steady stream. Once we have control, we can reallocate. I need to clear up that credit card debt before the interest kills me. And David's car lease is up. Selling the house is the key. That's the real prize. We can invest the principal, and the interest alone would be a huge help for both our families. Dad will never know the difference. He'll have his 3 meals a day and a roof over his head. It's a win-win. A win-win." I lay there perfectly still, but inside me, a storm broke. It wasn't a hot, raging anger. It was a glacial fury, cold, quiet, and utterly destructive. They weren't trying to protect me. They were harvesting me. They were vultures circling, waiting for me to be weak enough to pick apart. They were planning to sell my home, my sanctuary, the monument to my life with Eleanor, to pay for a car lease and clear some credit card debt. They were going to stick me in a subpar facility and bleed my life savings dry, all while patting my hand and telling me it was for my own good. The hurt, the deep, profound ache of their betrayal, solidified into something else. It was no longer just about survival. It wasn't about setting boundaries. It became about justice. It wasn't about revenge, until in that single horrifying moment, it was. The game had changed. They thought they were playing for the house. I was now playing for my life, and I decided in the feigned stillness of that armchair that I was not just going to win. I was going to leave them with nothing. Not a chip, not a chair, not a table to play at. I was going to burn their whole game to the ground. And the first match was about to be struck. The next morning, the fog of my performance was gone, replaced by the sharp crystalline focus I used to feel in the third hour of a no-limit tournament. The emotional hangover from their betrayal was still there, a low thrum of pain, but it was now fuel. Every condescending word, every dismissive gesture was another chip on my side of the table. They thought they were holding all the cards, but they didn't even know what game we were playing. They were playing checkers. I was about to start playing chess. My first move wasn't to confront them. That would be like showing your bluff too early. It gives your opponent time to react, to fold, to minimize their losses. No, the first move had to be silent.
It had to be invisible.
I had to rearrange the entire board without them even knowing a piece had been touched. Before I did anything else, I went to the old roll-top desk in my study, a room Chloe had recently suggested turning into a guest room for when the grandkids visit, a suggestion that was really about erasing my space. I unlocked a small, unassuming drawer. Inside was not a stack of old photos or war medals, but a small black book. It wasn't leather-bound or fancy. It was a simple spiral-bound notebook, the kind you buy at a drugstore for $1. But inside that book was the map to my real life, the life my children knew nothing about. I told them I'd retired from a mid-level insurance firm. It was a plausible, boring story that satisfied their need for a respectable father. The truth was, my retirement from the poker tables of Vegas wasn't a retreat into quiet senescence. It was a strategic reallocation of assets. For 20 years, I hadn't just been winning pots. I'd been cultivating connections. The men I played against weren't just gamblers, they were venture capitalists, real estate tycoons, and titans of industry who enjoyed the thrill of the game. We respected each other not for our pedigrees, but for our nerve. One of those men was Salvatore Sal Moretti. Sal was a pit bull in a $1,000 suit. We'd faced off countless times. He was a shark, but an honorable one. After he finally cashed out of the game for good, he started a boutique wealth management firm catering to people like us, people with unconventional, often hard-to-trace fortunes. He specialized in creating financial fortresses. I found his number in the black book. It wasn't for his public office. It was his private line. I used the old landline in my kitchen, a device my children found so quaint. I knew they weren't tapping it. They weren't that smart. He answered on the second ring. "Yeah, Sal, it's Vince." There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "Vinny the Viper. I'll be damned. I thought you'd finally gone off to that farm you bought in Vermont or whatever. It's a house in Ohio, Sal, and I'm still here. You don't call an old friend for a social, Vince. The pot's small or the pot's big. What's the play?" He always cut right to it. It's why I trusted him. "The pot's big, Sal. It's a family game, and I need to build a wall they can't see, hear, or climb." I explained the situation. I didn't color it with emotion. I laid it out like a hand history. The players, their positions, their likely holdings, and their strategy. I told him about Mark's debt, Chloe's lifestyle, their plan to sell the house and seize my accounts under the guise of a power of attorney. Sal was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had lost its playful edge. It was cold steel. "The vipers are in your own nest, Vince. It's the oldest story in the book. They see the golden goose, and they want to cut it open to get all the eggs at once. Amateurs. Disrespectful. That word, disrespectful. It resonated more than cruel or greedy. In our world, disrespect was the ultimate sin. "So what's the counterplay?" I asked. "It's not a counterplay. It's a whole new game," Sal said, and I could hear the gears turning in his brilliant, calculating mind. "They're coming at you on the ground level, checking accounts, savings, the deed to the house. We're going to operate from the stratosphere. First thing, we need to make you a ghost. Over the next week, Sal became my silent partner. He overnighted me a package containing a prepaid burner phone and a laptop with military-grade encryption. Our communication went dark. To my children, I was the same doddery old man, fumbling with the remote control and forgetting what day it was. But every night, after they were gone, I was on the phone with Sal and his team of legal and financial assassins. The plan was elegant in its brutality. First, the house. Mark and Chloe assumed the deed was in my name, a simple document waiting to be transferred. They didn't know that 15 years ago, on Sal's advice, I had placed the house and the land it sat on into a complex legal entity called an irrevocable life estate trust. I was the lifetime beneficiary, meaning I could live here until my death, but I wasn't the legal owner. The owner was the trust, and the trust's final beneficiary, upon my death, wasn't Mark or Chloe. It was the Eleanor C. Daniels Foundation for Performing Arts, a charity I'd established in my wife's name years ago. My children had no legal claim to the property. They could no more sell it than they could sell the moon. That was my first pair of hidden aces. Next, the money. My pension and Social Security were deposited into a simple checking account at a local bank. This was the account they had access to, the one they monitored. It was my decoy. It was the small pile of chips I kept in front of me to look non-threatening. My real wealth, the accumulated winnings from 2 decades in Vegas, was a different story. It was a dragon's hoard, spread across a dozen entities, offshore accounts, real estate holdings in 3 different states, managed by shell corporations, and a portfolio of private equity investments so dense it would take a team of forensic accountants a year to unravel. It was all controlled by a master trust, the Vegas Sunset Trust, of which Sal was the sole executor. That was my second pair of aces. So what do we do now? I asked Sal one night, my voice low. Now Vince, you let them make their move, he said. You let them push their chips in. You've got them cornered and they don't even know it. The beauty of this is, we don't have to do anything aggressive. We just have to move your decoys off the table. Let's start with the checking account, the one your boy Mark has his eye on. Sal's plan was simple. I would go to a different branch of my bank, one in a town 20 miles away. I would close the existing joint checking and savings accounts. The funds would be transferred electronically to a new account at a new bank, one whose name my children had never heard. This new account would be solely in my name, with instructions that no information was to be given to anyone, under any circumstances, without my physical presence and a specific password. A password I chose myself, Eleanor. The day I did it, I felt a tremor of something that wasn't just resolve. It was exhilaration. I put on my confused old man costume, a slightly too large cardigan, a pair of glasses I didn't really need, and a shuffling walk. I must have looked pathetic. But as I sat there signing the papers to close the accounts my children saw as their birthright, I felt a surge of power I hadn't felt in years. I was the viper, coiled and ready to strike. I even laid a bit of bait. While at the bank, I asked the teller in a loud, wavering voice, "Now, are you sure this is all taken care of? My son Mark, he usually handles this for me." I get so muddled. The teller, a kind young woman, assured me everything was in order, patting my hand with genuine sympathy. It was perfect. While I was out, I also made another stop. I went to a small independent grocery store on the other side of town, a place I knew my children would never frequent. I bought a week's worth of good food. Steak, fresh vegetables, a bottle of expensive bourbon. Then I went home and waited. I knew I wouldn't have to wait long. The first tremor hit 2 days later. It was a Saturday. Chloe always did my grocery shopping on Saturday mornings, using a credit card linked to my now-defunct checking account. I was in the garden, genuinely enjoying the feel of the sun on my back, when my phone rang. It was Chloe. Her voice was tight, strained. Dad. Hi. Funny thing. The card was declined at the grocery store. I put on my best bewildered act. Declined. What does that mean, honey? Is the machine broken? No, Dad. It's not broken. It says insufficient funds. Did you, did you buy something big? Her voice was sharp with accusation. Me? Oh heavens no. I just bought my pills. But that's not much. Are you sure you used the right one? Yes, I'm sure, she snapped. The little girl voice gone, replaced by raw frustration. I'll call Mark. She hung up without saying goodbye. I smiled. The first card had been turned. They'd just seen the flop, and it didn't match their hand at all. I went inside, poured myself a glass of that excellent bourbon, and sat in my chair. Not the slumped, sleeping man, but the king on his throne. The phone rang again 20 minutes later. It was Mark. Dad, what the hell is going on? Chloe said the card was declined. I just logged into the bank portal online. And it's gone. The account is gone. It says it was closed. Closed. My goodness, that doesn't sound right, I said, taking a slow sip of my drink. The smoky taste was a sweet reward. No, it's not right. It's all gone. The checking, the savings, everything. What did you do? Well, let's see, I said, pretending to rack my brain. I did go to the bank the other day. Spoke to a nice young lady. She said something about consolidating, for simplicity, to save on fees. She said she'd send a letter. A letter, Dad. You don't just close a joint account without telling me. That's where your pension goes. How are we supposed to pay your bills? How are we supposed to manage things? The we was telling. He wasn't worried about my bills. He was worried about his access. Oh, don't you worry your head about that, son, I said, using his own condescending phrase against him. The nice lady at the new bank said everything is all set up. It's all automatic now. Much simpler. New bank. What new bank? He demanded, his voice rising in panic. Oh dear. I don't seem to recall the name. It had a tree in the logo, or maybe it was a mountain. My memory, you know. I could almost feel his apoplectic rage vibrating through the phone. He was a man who prided himself on control, on understanding the numbers, and I had just thrown a match into his perfectly balanced spreadsheet. He sputtered for a moment, then caught himself, his voice becoming dangerously calm. Dad, we're coming over. Tonight. We need to sort this out. All of us. Of course, son. A family meeting. What a lovely idea, I said, and hung up the phone. I looked around the quiet living room, at the ghosts and memories that filled the space. They weren't sad ghosts anymore. They were my audience. Eleanor was there. I could feel her, and she was smiling. The show was about to begin. And my children, the entitled, condescending, pitying stars of their own little drama, had no idea they were about to be written out of the script entirely. The trap was set, the bait was taken, and the door had just slammed shut behind them. The hours leading up to the family meeting were some of the calmest I'd felt in months. The anxiety that had been a constant low-grade hum in my chest was gone, replaced by a cold, thrilling certainty. It was the same feeling I used to get sitting at a final table, my chip stack healthy, my opponents on tilt. They were playing with scared money now. They were emotional, reactive. I was operating from a place of pure, calculated logic. They thought they were coming over to fix a problem. They didn't realize they were the problem, and I was the solution. I spent the afternoon preparing the stage. I didn't tidy up in the way Chloe would have, frantically wiping down surfaces and plumping pillows. Instead, I made subtle adjustments. I took the glossy brochures for the pines and sunny meadows and placed them in the fireplace, nestled under the logs, ready for a ceremonial burning. On the mahogany coffee table, where they expected to see my confusion and vulnerability, I placed only one thing, a single unadorned glass of water. It was a prop, a symbol of clarity and control. I took a shower and put on one of my best suits. Not a Vegas suit with its flashy silk, but a classic charcoal gray wool suit that Eleanor had bought for me on our 30th anniversary. It was a suit of substance, of quiet authority. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a frail 71-year-old man. I saw Vincent Daniels. I saw the man who had built this life from nothing but nerve and intelligence. The stoop in my shoulders was gone. The practiced, vacant look in my eyes was replaced by a sharp, focused intensity. The mask was off. When the doorbell rang at precisely 7 o'clock, I didn't shuffle to the door. I walked. I opened it to find Mark and Chloe standing on my porch, their faces a mixture of frustration and forced patience. Chloe was holding a large leather portfolio, the power of attorney documents. They were going all in. "Dad," Mark started, his voice tight. "You look nice." He was thrown off balance. He was expecting the cardigan, the shuffling slippers. He was expecting a victim. "Come in," I said, my voice even and steady. I didn't smile. I didn't offer them a drink. I simply gestured toward the living room and then took my seat in my armchair. My throne. They sat opposite me on the sofa, a united front of filial concern. The leather portfolio was placed squarely on the coffee table between us. "Dad, we need to talk," Chloe began, adopting her soft, reasonable tone. "We're worried. This thing with the bank. It's not like you. You're confused. You're making impulsive decisions that could hurt you." "Hurt me?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Yes." Mark cut in, taking over. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, trying to project an air of command. "You closed the accounts we use to manage your expenses, your bills for the utilities, your property taxes. They're all set to auto-draft from that account. They're going to bounce. Your credit will be ruined. You could lose the house." He was trying to scare me. It was a classic bluff, trying to represent a hand much stronger than it was. He was hoping I'd get flustered, that I'd see their help as the only logical solution. I just looked at him. I didn't respond. I let the silence hang in the air, thick and uncomfortable. In poker, silence is a weapon. It forces the other player to talk, to fill the void, and often to reveal information they shouldn't. Chloe, unnerved by the quiet, rushed to fill it. "Mark's right, Dad. We can't let that happen. That's why we came prepared." She tapped the leather portfolio. "Mark's lawyer drew these up. It's a durable power of attorney. It just lets us help. It lets us handle the finances, make sure the bills are paid, and protect your assets. It's a safety net. It's what's best for you." "Best for me," I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I looked from my son's earnest, greedy face to my daughter's mask of loving manipulation. The moment had arrived. It was time to turn over the cards. I leaned back in my chair, a small, cold smile touching my lips for the first time that evening. "You know, for two people who think my mind is slipping, you seem to have put a great deal of faith in my inability to understand my own affairs." The change in my demeanor was so abrupt it was like a physical blow. They both straightened up, their eyes wide with shock. The fog was gone. The old man they had constructed in their minds had vanished, replaced by the stranger sitting before them. "What?" Mark stammered. "Let me be clear," I said, my voice cutting through the room like cold steel, "so that even in your perceived intellectual superiority you cannot possibly misunderstand." I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto his. "First, the bills. Don't you worry about them. The utility accounts, the property taxes, everything has been transferred to a new payment system, managed by my financial advisor. Everything was paid in full for the next year. This afternoon, there will be no bounced payments. My credit, which is frankly none of your business, is impeccable." Mark's jaw went slack. Chloe's face paled. "Second," I continued, turning my gaze to her, "this house. You speak of selling it as if it were a piece of furniture. You talked in the dining room the other night, when you thought I was asleep, about how the sale would be the real prize, a way to pay for car leases and credit card debt." Chloe let out a small, strangled gasp. She looked at Mark, her eyes screaming panic. They were caught. I'm afraid I have some bad news for you on that front, I said, savoring the moment. You see, this house hasn't legally been mine to sell for the past 15 years. It is the primary asset of the Eleanor C. Daniels Foundation. I am merely the lifetime tenant. Upon my death, the house and its contents will be managed by the Foundation's board to provide grants to aspiring young musicians and dancers. It is not, nor will it ever be, your inheritance. You cannot sell what you will never own. The silence that followed was profound. It was the sound of two lives, two futures built on a foundation of greedy assumption, crumbling to dust. Chloe's hand went to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears of self-pity, not remorse. Mark, however, rallied. He was a fighter. I'll give him that. He defaulted to anger. You're lying. You're confused. You don't know what you're talking about. We'll see about that. We'll contest it. I almost laughed. It was the desperate all-in shove of a man holding nothing. Contested on what grounds? That I was of unsound mind 15 years ago when I set it up with my legal and financial team. I assure you, the paperwork is ironclad. My advisor, Mr. Moretti, is meticulous. You may remember him. You met him once at a charity dinner. You called him the loud Italian guy. Mark flinched as if I'd slapped him. He remembered. And finally I said, my voice dropping to an almost conversational tone, there's the matter of this. I gestured to the leather portfolio. The power of attorney. Your safety net. Let me tell you what I think it is. I think it's a crowbar, a tool you intended to use to pry open my life, take what you wanted, and leave me in a box at the Pines to wait for death. I stood up from my chair. I walked over to the fireplace, picked up a book of matches from the mantel, and struck one. The small flame flickered to life. I then reached down and picked up the brochures I'd placed there earlier. I lit the corner of the one for the Pines. It caught, the glossy paper curling and turning black. This is what I think of your plans for me, I said, dropping the burning brochure into the fireplace where it began to ignite the others. The flames grew, casting a warm, dancing light across the shocked faces of my children. My mind is not slipping, Mark. My hearing is not failing, Chloe. I have been sitting here for weeks, listening. I have been watching. I played the part you wrote for me because it's what you needed to see. You needed me to be weak so you could feel strong. You needed me to be a fool so you could feel clever. You overestimated your own intelligence, and far more dangerously, you underestimated mine. It's the classic amateur mistake. I turned back to them, the firelight reflecting in my eyes. The money you've grown so accustomed to, the quiet support that has funded your lives, is gone. The bank you can no longer access is a ghost. The assets you thought you would inherit are a phantom. The father you thought you could control is no longer here. From this moment on, you are on your own. You want to manage a budget? Manage your own. You want to protect assets? Protect your own. My life is no longer your resource to be plundered. I walked to the front door and opened it, letting the cool night air wash into the room. The meeting is over. It's time for you to leave my house. They just sat there, stunned into silence. The sheer brutal finality of it had broken them. Chloe was openly weeping now, not for me, but for herself. Mark just stared at the fire, his face a mask of disbelief and impotent rage. Get out, I said, my voice no longer loud, but a low, dangerous command. Slowly, as if in a trance, they stood up. They didn't look at me. They couldn't. They walked past me, out the door, and into the darkness. I watched them go, two children, lost and adrift, stripped of the unearned privilege that had been their life's compass. I closed the door, turned the deadbolt, and leaned against it. The silence of the house was different now. It wasn't empty. It was peaceful. It was mine. The power hadn't just shifted. It had returned to its rightful owner. The game was over. I had won. In the weeks and months that followed, the silence from my children was absolute. It was a stark contrast to the constant cloying attention they had showered on me before. There were no more daily check-in calls from Mark. No more surprise visits with mushy casseroles from Chloe. The hand-patting had ceased. It seemed that without the prospect of financial gain, their filial concern had evaporated completely. It was the most painful and yet the most validating truth I could have learned. Their love, or what I had mistaken for love, was purely transactional. And when the bank closed, so did their hearts. I didn't wallow in it. The grief for the relationship I thought I had was real, but it was a clean grief, like the amputation of a diseased limb. It hurt, but it was necessary for survival. The first thing I did was call Sal. "It's done," I told him, my voice steady over the burner phone. I saw the wire transfers, or rather the lack of attempted transfer. Sal replied, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Radio silence on their end. "Complete," I said. "Good. That's how you know you hit the target. Now what, Vince? You going to sit in that big house and count your money?" "No," I said, looking out the window at the garden I'd neglected during my performance. "I'm going to live." And I did. I started small. I ripped out the bland, manicured shrubs. Chloe had insisted on planting and put in a sprawling vegetable garden, full of tomatoes, peppers, and unruly zucchini vines. I got my hands dirty. I felt the sun on my back, not as a threat that might make me dizzy, but as a source of life. I started cooking for myself again. Real food, with garlic and spices and flavor. I made a pot of chili so hot it would have sent Chloe into a panicked call to poison control. It was glorious. I reconnected with the few old friends I still had from my Vegas days. Men like Sal who understood the language of risk and reward. We didn't talk about the old games, not much anyway. We talked about new ventures. On Sal's advice, I took a small portion of my Vegas Sunset Trust and became a silent partner in a new restaurant downtown, a place run by a brilliant young chef who just needed a chance. It felt good to be the house again, but this time I was helping someone build something, not just taking an opponent's chips. I even had a karmic agent, as Sal would call it, deliver a report from the front lines. It was Chloe's husband, David. He called me one afternoon, his voice hesitant and deeply uncomfortable. I almost hung up, but my curiosity got the better. "Vincent? It's David." "I know who it is," I said, my tone neutral. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry," he stammered, "for my part in all of it. I didn't understand the whole picture. Chloe, she's not doing well." This was interesting. I remained silent, letting him fill the void. The credit card debt Mark was talking about. It wasn't his. It was ours. Chloe, she has a shopping problem. And Mark, his financial advisory's business is a house of cards. He was using your accounts to cover his clients' losses, hoping for a market turnaround that never came. He's being investigated by the SEC. They're both ruined. He told me they'd had to sell their oversized house in the suburbs and move into a small apartment. Mark's wife had left him. Chloe spent most of her days crying, not out of remorse for what she'd done to me, but out of fury that her lifestyle had been taken away. They had tried to hire a lawyer to contest my trust, but no one would take the case once they saw the documents Sal's team had drawn up. They were airtight. "She blames you, of course," David said quietly. "She says you're a cruel old man who tricked them." "Did I?" I asked. "Or did I simply stop letting them trick themselves?" David didn't have an answer. He said his goodbye, and I never heard from him again. I heard through Sal a few months later that he'd filed for divorce. He was a social climber, but even he knew when a ship was sinking. It wasn't a story that brought me joy. It was just the consequences. It was the turn of the final card. They had bluffed with nothing in their hand, and the pot had been too big. They lost. It was the inevitable outcome of their own choices, their own greed and disrespect. I hadn't ruined them. I had simply removed the safety net that had been preventing them from ruining themselves for years. My new life settled into a comfortable rhythm. I had my garden, my investment in the restaurant, and my peace. The Eleanor C. Daniels Foundation began awarding its first scholarships. I attended the ceremony. I sat in the back, just another old man in the audience, and watched a young woman with a violin and eyes full of fire play a piece that made the whole room hold its breath. She spoke afterward about how the scholarship meant she didn't have to choose between her art and her rent. That was Eleanor's legacy. That was my legacy. Not a house to be sold for a car lease. One evening, I was sitting in my armchair reading a book when I saw headlights sweep across the living room wall. A car had pulled into my driveway. I felt a flicker of the old tension, but it passed. I was secure. I got up and looked through the window. It was Chloe's car. She got out and stood for a long time on the walkway, just looking at the house. She looked smaller, diminished. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a worn-out coat. She looked her age, for the first time in a long time. She looked tired. She walked to the door and rang the bell. I didn't answer. She rang it again. Then she just stood there. I watched her, a silhouette against the twilight. I felt a pang of something ancient, the instinctual love a father has for his child. But it was followed by the cold, hard memory of her voice, whispering in the dining room about the pines and the real prize. She wasn't here to apologize. I knew that with a gambler's certainty. She was here because she had run out of options. She was here to try a new angle, to play the pity card, to see if the old man had softened. I watched her for another minute, and then I turned away from the window, went back to my chair, and picked up my book. I turned on the reading lamp beside me, a small, warm pool of light in the quiet room. Outside, the doorbell rang a third time, then a fourth. Then silence. After a few minutes, I heard a car door close and the sound of an engine starting. The headlights swept across the room one last time, and then she was gone. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt quiet. It was the quiet of a game that is finally truly over. The table was clear. The players had gone home, and the house had won. But more than that, the man who owned the house, the man they had tried to erase, was still here. He was home, and he was free. So that's my story. It wasn't about the money. Not really. In the end, it was about respect. It was about them trying to take the last thing I had left to bet with my own life. They saw an old man, and they forgot about the man inside. Don't ever let anyone do that to you. Don't let them define you by your age, by your perceived weakness. Your life is your own. Your mind is your own. And your story is yours to write right up until the very last word. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt overlooked or underestimated, let me know in the comments below. What would you have done in my shoes? There's strength in sharing our experiences, in knowing we're not alone. Like this video if you believe in standing up for yourself, and subscribe for more stories about turning the tables on those who think they hold all the power. Remember, it's never too late to play your own hand.